Mrs. Gate at the Library of Whispers, and today we're going to take a look at this lovely book, Haunted Homes and Family Legends of Great Britain. I really love this book. It's quite old. It was published in 1901. Ghost stories. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is light my candles. So let's strike a match. And the next one. Okay, so I actually have put a match, an old match, here, because I wanted to read this particular part. About Eton. Let's begin. Several writers of a past generation, including Joseph Glanville, were fond of relating the story of Major Sydenham and his friend, Captain William Dyke, but it appears to have escaped the researches of modern commentators on the supernatural. Shortly after the death of Major Sydenham, Dr. Thomas Dyke called on his cousin, Captain William Dyke of Skilgate, in the county of Somersetshire, and agreed to pass the night with him. At the captain's request, Dr. Dyke agreed to sleep in the same bed with his cousin, but previous to composing himself to sleep, the doctor was aroused by his companion, calling up a servant and bidding the man bring him 2 of the largest candles he could obtain, and have them lighted. The doctor naturally inquired what these were intended for, to which the captain answered, "You know, cousin, what disputes the Major and I have had touching the immortality of the soul, on which point we could never yet be resolved, though we so much desired it, and therefore it was at length fully agreed between us that he who died first should, the 3rd night after his funeral, between the hours of 12 and 1, come to the little house which is here in the garden, and there give a full account touching these matters to the survivor, who should be sure to be present there at the set time, and so receive a full satisfaction. And this, says the captain, is the very night, and I am come on purpose to my present lodging to fulfil my promise." The doctor advised him not to follow strange counsels for which he could have no warrant. The captain replied that he had solemnly engaged, and that nothing should discourage him, and added that if the doctor should wake a while with him, he would shake him. If not, he might compose himself to rest, but, for his own part, he was resolved to watch, that he might be sure to be present at the hour appointed. To that purpose, he set his watch by him, and as soon as he perceived that it was half an hour past 11, he arose, and taking a candle in each hand, went out by a back door, of which he had before got the key, and walked into the garden house, where he continued is the matter?" The captain replied, "I have seen the Major." The doctor, seeming to smile, the captain said, "If ever I saw him in my life, I saw him but now," and then related to the doctor what had passed. "This morning, after it was light," said he, "one came to my bedside, and suddenly, drawing back the curtains, called, 'Captain, Captain,' to whom I replied, 'What, Major?' To which he returned, 'I could not come at the time appointed, but I am now come to tell you that there is a God, and a very just and terrible one, and if you do not turn over a new leaf,' the very expression the doctor punctually remembered, "you shall find it so." The captain proceeded. On the table there lay a sword which the Major had formerly given me, and after the apparition had walked a turn or two about the chamber, he took up the sword, drew it, and finding it not so bright as it ought to be, cried, "Captain, Captain, this sword did not used to be kept after this manner when it was mine," after which he presently disappeared. The captain was not only thoroughly persuaded of the truth of what he had seen and heard, but was from that time observed to have become quite an altered man, and it was judged by those who were well acquainted with his conversation that the remembrance of this passage stuck close to him, and that those words of his dead friend were frequently sounding in his ears during the remainder of his life, which was something more than 2 years. Okay, so let us go on a little further. Okay. The result of a curse. In Dr. Lee's Glimpses of the Supernatural, a collection of ghost stories and revivified medieval legends, is given a marvellous narrative of the results of a curse, as according to the Reverend author. Fresh evidence of the existence of the supernatural amongst us, had we only eyes to see and ears to hear. We include the story in our collection as a first specimen of the way in which such subjects are treated in our days, but must suggest that it would bear a greater air of vraisemblance were the names of some at least of the persons introduced given, or some more definite clue to the localities afforded. The story as told by Dr. Lee is this. The younger son of a Nova Scotia baronet, under promise of marriage, betrayed the only surviving daughter of a Northumbrian yeoman of ancient and respectable family, nearly allied to a peer, so created in William the Fourth's reign. She was a person of rare beauty and of considerable accomplishments, having received an education of a very superior character in Edinburgh. After her betrayal, she was deserted by her lover, who fled abroad. The night before he left, however, at her earnest request, he met her in company with a friend, with the avowed intention of promising marriage in the future, when his family, as he declared, might be less averse to it. After events showed that this was merely an empty promise, and that he had neither stone nor memorial marks her grave. Her father, a widower, wounded to the quick by the loss of his only daughter, pined away and soon followed her to his last resting place. 5 years had passed, and the female cousin of the old yeoman, being possessed of her competency, had gone to live in London, when on a certain morning in the spring of the year 1842, she was passing by a church in the West End, where, from the number of carriages waiting, she saw that a marriage was being solemnised. She felt mysteriously and instinctively drawn to look in. On doing so, and pressing forwards towards the altar, she beheld, to her astonishment, the very man, somewhat altered and weather-worn, who had caused so much misery to her relations, being married, as, on inquiring, she discovered, to the daughter of a rich city merchant. This affected her deeply, bringing back the saddest memories of the past. But as the bridal party were passing out of the church, and she pushed forward to look, and be quite sure she had made no mistake, both herself and the bridegroom at one moment saw an apparition of her relation, the poor girl, whom he had ruined, dressed in white, with flowing hair and a wild look, holding up in both hands her little infant. Both seemed perfectly natural in appearance, and to be of ordinary flesh and blood. There was no mistaking her certain identity. This occurred in the full sunshine of noon, and under a heavy Palladian porch in the presence of a crowd. The bridegroom turned deathly pale in a moment, trembled violently, and then, staggering, fell forward down the steps. This occasioned a vast stir and sensation among the crowd. It seemed incomprehensible. The bridegroom, said the church officials in answer to inquiries, was in a fit. He was carried down the steps and taken in the bridal carriage to his father-in-law's house, but it was reported that he never spoke again, and this fact is mentioned in a contemporary newspaper account of the event. Anyhow, his marriage and death appeared in the same number of one of the daily papers, and although the family of the city merchant knew nothing of the apparition, what is thus set forth was put on record by the lady in question, who knew the mysterious circumstances in all their details, which record is reasonably believed by her to afford at once a signal example of retributive justice and marked piece of evidence of the supernatural. Names, for various reasons, are not mentioned here. The truth of this narrative, however, was affirmed on oath by the lady in question. Why or wherefore, Dr. Lee does not state. Before two justices of the peace at Windsor on October the 3rd, 1848, one of whom was a beneficed clergyman in the diocese of Oxford, well known to the editor of this volume, to whom this record was given in the year 1857, when he was assistant minister of Berkeley Chapel by a lady of rank who worshipped there. Well, I hope you enjoyed that couple of stories. There are plenty more in this book we can read again. Thank you very much for joining.